Good morning, everyone. I'd like to start by I'll say thank you to everyone for joining the webinar. Personally, I'm very excited to have you here. So I'll just jump right in. And in putting this keynote together, I stayed away from technical jargon and complex narratives. And this was very deliberate to ensure that every one of us, no matter our background, can leave with a fair understanding of what open banking is all about, and of course, the technology that is needed to drive it. So first, when we think about banking, or when we think about our interactions with banking or banking services, what typically comes to mind? And usually it's customers interacting directly with each institution, regardless of the number of institutions, right? So if you've got services or you use services in 5 different institutions, well, chances are you are interacting directly with each of them anytime you need to consume those services. Or financial packages or products that are offered to you are typically from the institutions directly and may differ across each of them. And when we delve into it, we start to realize things like service is centered around the institutions. Innovation is largely limited or is driven by each institution and their capability for new products and new services, right? And this is how I imagine the ecosystem has been for many years. This is how the industry has been for many years. So the question is, what if we could unlock the next level of banking services, right? What if we could provide more innovative financial products? Can we increase market opportunities? Can we, promote financial inclusion? Can we do things like driving further innovative growth? I mean, it's a very mature industry, right? Is there a next level for banking? And ultimately, can we enhance customer experience? And customer here might be an individual, it could be a corporate, can we really just move things to the next level? Now, when we start to think about what does open banking look like, this quick illustration basically is intended to demonstrate what banking services look like today, right? Where I might have a provider of service, it's called a provider A, I might have provider B, provider C. And for me as an individual, I use 3 providers for my banking services. Now, there might be others in the market. I might not be interested in running through the onboarding process for every single one. So I'm satisfied with these 3. But what if there's a service offering in one of these providers that really meets my needs? It doesn't matter. This is where I started, maybe because my parents were with provider A, or in school I use B, for whatever reason, right? We tend to pick a few and sit there. But then, again, in sort of moving this forward, right, in evolving this industry, what if with my consent, right, we enabled secure access to some of my financial data within the banking sector, right? And this is probably the key sort of what if, and I'll stay away from the how. We can get very technical in the how. But if we were able, with your consent or with my consent, with the user's consent, enable some access to the data, what does this ecosystem start to look like? And so in this picture, I've brought in a consumer. Right now, consumer is still a regulated, it's still it's an institution, right? It's not, it's a company. It's a regulated company that is able or is allowed to connect to each of the providers, even all the others. I've only done 3 here, but it could be all of them. But the point is, they connect to access some financial data and offer me a service, right? And at the moment, of course, there's ideas as to what these could be, but at the moment, it's more interesting for me for us to think about this, right? What if consumer B shows up and they connect to all the providers and then offer a service? What does that start to mean, right? And of course, in none of this have we said the provider cannot continue to provide services directly. What kind of services would this be? What could those be? What could B be doing, right? And what enables this, at the core? What even allows this sort of interaction, this type of conversation? is a secure sharing of some data, consented data, which is data that's the user consents to, via APIs, right? I'm staying away from having to define what an API is, so just work with me. API, just accept it, right? But secure sharing of data based on the consent from the individual. That's what powers, or at least creates, an environment where you could even have a consumer A or B that's offering other services. So what we believe, I think what's been demonstrated by open banking, is that by doing so, by sort of providing this secure area where consumers can interact with providers and based on user consent have access to some financial data, you're able to offer a lot more services to people, right? I mean, the traditional services can still happen directly, right? But then we open up a whole new sort of market opportunity, right? For example, things like account aggregation applications where, I could have an app, and I'm just spitballing now. You can have an app that, you want to check your balances or your statements across the entire financial ecosystem. It doesn't matter which provider necessarily. And you can say, I want to check here, 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 or I want to see my net worth all aggregated, right? That's a service that could be provided, right? You want to do budgeting or financial management. Maybe that's one. You want personalized financial advice. You want alternative lending that looks at your entire footprint, right? If you're a corporate, you want some AI tools that do cash flow forecasting for you across all, all your banking service providers, so to speak, right? You see, the possibilities start to evolve, and I think the ecosystem starts to even move forward, right? And that's really, I would say, what's at the heart of open banking, and that's where maybe the word open comes from, right? Is the ability to do a lot more for taking this ecosystem by making it a bit more open, built around consent, right? Consent and secure sharing of some data. We're able to really enhance the market and enrich customer experience. But more than that, if you notice, now there's multiple players in the type A space. Now there's multiple players in type B, right? There's competition. There's driving down costs. There's providing better services, right? There's expanding the market. And all of this is done, of course, within a very tight framework. So security is key. Compliance is absolutely a must. The APIs have their place. Consent drives all of this. Governance, discovery, I put discovery here, which is basically things like what are the base type of information sets you can get from every provider, right? What are some of the unique services you can get from some providers, right? How does the consumer discover some of that? That's also very important. There's analytics, right? And most of all, I like to say there's innovation. How do we use this, right? Of course, we can learn from what's been done, but in our own local climate, how do we use this to derive the maximum value? And there is one note I put here when we talk about things like financial inclusion. How does this help us drive financial inclusion? You see, once we're a bit more open with data and with the consent, and some of the data can be anonymized, then we start to provide the basis for which certain demographics can be targeted, right? Whether it's in disbursements of whether it's palliative type things or just a different type of trade that happens to go after a very specific demographic, you start to enable specific use cases, niche use cases, right? All built around the financial sector, right? And this is what the promise of new markets, new demographics, financial inclusion, right? We start to enable some of these. So what technologies will drive open banking? And obviously there's security, compliance, APIs. I've just talked about that. But on this slide, I want us to think about things a bit differently, right? And the technologies that will drive open banking are not limited to the technologies that create it, right? I think it includes the technologies that utilize its potential to deliver maximum value. And let me use an analogy here. So, I mean, think about a car. Let's think about a car. We all know what cars are, right? Now, when you think about a car, think about roads. traffic lights, parking lots, car washes, right? You see, the tech that makes a car is very different from the tech that makes the road, that makes the other things, the traffic lights and so on and so forth. But how far the car goes is really dependent on where the roads are, right? Or maybe I flip it to a question. How far can a car go if they're limited roads? Where is the car going if they're limited destinations, right? So for me, when I think about what are the technologies that drive open banking, these aren't the technologies that necessarily created, but what are the technologies that help it fulfill its potential, right? How do we use this to deliver the maximum benefits in our own ecosystem? And while these aren't technologies, what I've just added, the things like innovation and collaboration are the things that I think will help us see or like discover what those things really will be in our own climb, in our own ecosystem. What are the viable use cases? There's this thing in entrepreneurship where they say, sometimes you have to have an unfair advantage to take over a market. So some people may have access to certain communities, right? And because of that access, because of that native trust, they're able to, deliver on certain use cases that may not be viable for others, right? And open banking may just be the car, but they provide the road, they provide the destination, right? What are some payments innovation solutions? Are there some targeted investments we can do, right? And which technologies drive those? I didn't come here with all the answers, right? But what I hope what we're doing is starting to show, look, open banking itself is enabled through compliance, there's security, there's monitoring, there's registries, we understand that part, but that's the car. We all have a role to play, I think, in obviously we can learn from roads that have been built, but we also have our own unique sort of ecosystem, and we have our own work to do around collaboration and innovation. Right? Now, around the world, open banking around the world, the journey really began, I would say, in the UK and in the Europe. Most of the EU has adopted this. UK certainly has. But there's only about 2 points I want to make here. From what we see, about 75% of the products created so far are in the categories of payment, credit facilities, and financial advisory. That's not to say there are not others, right? But there is a lot of potential that's been unlocked in the banking services area with open banking, right? And yeah, I think we can learn from these countries. And if you go online, there's so much to be learned. So in summary, what is open banking all about? And I think it's about empowerment through data ownership, right? Where we start to build more around consent. And if we're able to share more of that data, we create new industries, we open up the marketplace and actually create a better experience for ourselves. I think it's about innovation, through collaboration. It allows us to actually collaborate and solve our local problems, right? I also believe in competition, right? Creating a whole new space where people can compete to offer better services, whether that's around account aggregation, or that's around, financial services, or, budget, cash flow forecasting, and then transparency and accountability. You see, when it's open and when it requires the secure connection of many players, then standardization and openness and transparency has to follow. Standards have to be met, right? Compliance is a given. So we're no longer siloed. We're now working as a true ecosystem with multiple people consuming our services. You've got to have the moment we deviate, anyone deviates slightly, it breaks. So transparency and accountability becomes almost like a de facto. But most of all, I think that makes me excited is it's now a customer-centric approach where the entire industry, entire service-oriented industry is focused on the customers, on the problems, and really starting to try to unlock the potential, I believe, of banking services. And thank you very much for listening.